My name is Paul Barnhurst, and I'll be hosting the discussion with our panelists. We have one more panelist that'll be here in a minute, but we'll go ahead and get started here. We have Mark Calavio with us, Head of Product at Restaurant 365. And then we also have Tyler Hodge. He's the Senior VP of Product and Strategy at Divvy. And then Ron Ross is the COO and co-founder of Every. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start just giving each of you a chance, just maybe take a minute and introduce a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start getting into some questions. We'll go with Mark and just work through the panel here. And we should have one more joining us in just a minute.
Mark Calvillo, SVP of Product at Restaurant 365. We are based in Southern California, flew in yesterday. We are a restaurant ERP system, kind of soup to nuts, scheduling, inventory, back office, accounting product as well. And I've been with the organization for about 4 years now. Started back in 2018, and we have gone through a huge growth. We've grown so much over the past 4 years, and I'm really excited to be here and talk about some of the things I'm hearing from you out there as CFOs in the industry.
Thanks.
My name is Ron Ross. You have to pass this around. Is that better? Yeah. Ron Ross, co-founder, president and COO of Every. We're a full-service HR, payroll, and payments platform focused on fast pay, paying your workers and contractors as fast as possible. My background is I'm a former controller, VP of finance, CFO a couple times over, so I was in your seat professionally. That's where I spent my career. I founded Every with the help of Tyler Pluger, who's one of the co-founders here, and some other co-founders. We're focused on disrupting payroll, in particular getting employees their pay as fast as possible.
Hi everyone, my name is Tyler Hogue. I lead the product organization at a software company named Divvy. We provide a corporate card and expense management software for small and medium-sized and mid-market businesses, and we're acquired by Bill.com last year. Happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Hey, I'm Dave Aditya, CEO of Plena. We're a tech startup based out of Pleasant Grove. We do robots for automating manual repetitive tasks. We started off with just accounting robots. We have since expanded to other verticals.
All right, well, thank you guys for introducing yourself. We have a few questions we're going to go through with the panelists, and if you guys have a question throughout, feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. But we're going to start here with Tyler and just kind of ask, as you look at the expense management space, what type of product innovations do you expect CFOs to see over the next few years?
Yeah, sure. So there's this old saying in software that there's only two ways to make money, either bundling or unbundling. And we're in this phase, it's very clear from my seat at Divvy, we're in this phase of bundling right now. And by bundling, I mean taking what used to be like a point solution, one software, and pulling it together with other solutions into a platform. And so the example of Divvy is we're going through that as well. Think of about 10 years ago, every company just had a separate corporate card, and then they had to reimburse employees through expense reports. Well, Divvy had a point solution where they combined the corporate card with expense report automation. And immediately there was like an increase in productivity with the company because you no longer have to do expense reports anymore. And that process is just actually rapidly increasing. So now we're seeing not only do you have the card, but the expense report, but what if you bundled together bill pay software with your receivable software, with potentially working capital loans and a bank account, and you have this now platform that's bundled together. And this is kind of the main innovation we're seeing across software for CFOs, is CFOs are demanding this type of consolidation, not only because it's easier to manage one vendor than 10, but because there's some product flywheels that make the overall solution better. And in a time where you're trying to lower costs, in an uncertain environment, bundling is just increasing in speed. We're seeing it day after day after day that people are kind of demanding this bundle. So I would call it bundling is probably the biggest innovation we're seeing across the space.
Okay, and as you see that bundling, what advice, kind of as you see these innovations, would you offer for CFOs?
Yeah, I think it's demand a lot from your vendors. There are still, 99% of companies are still living in the past where they actually their employees have to basically front the company money and spend out of their personal credit card and then submit an expense report, and CFOs don't have one dashboard to view all of their spending across the company. So I think it's demand a lot out of your vendors and realize that there's ways to increase productivity across your entire employee base right now.
Thanks, appreciate that, Tyler. We'll go ahead and go to Ron here next. How do you think payroll is going to change over the next 5 to 10 years? What are you seeing? Kind of what are you projecting?
Sure. To frame that, my response up to that question, 5 to 10 years, I think there are some trends that will ultimately influence what we see in payroll. One thing that will happen in that time frame is we're going to lose the baby boomers from the workforce, and we're going to be adding in what's called Generation A or Generation Alpha to the workforce. And so we're going to have a big chunk of our workforce, in particular from the millennials on forward, who are very comfortable with technology, who have grown up with cell phones in their pockets, are very familiar with using consumer apps. So one thing I think is going to happen in payroll is payroll is going to have to get a lot easier to use. You're going to have these new entrants into the workforce that are very familiar with a consumer app type experience, and it's quite a shock when they get into workforce applications. And for example, the whole notion of having to go to a 2-day seminar to learn how to use a payroll module, it's just not going to work. So payroll is going to have to get a lot more easier. Coming out of the pandemic, I think there's going to be a few trends that are going to persist. One of those is nice. Just in case we have any cars that were going to make their way into the conference room.
It means we can't get out.
So speaking of trends that we're seeing now that sort of emerged from the pandemic, we have gig work, which is gaining momentum. I saw a recent stat that up to 35% of the workforce is now engaged actively in doing gig work. Another trend that we're seeing is remote work. And it's going to be interesting to see where that settles in. There's this tug of war that's happening right now between employers and employees. And I read a stat this morning that 60% of workers want to work remotely, but only 5% of employers plan on a remote-first operating environment for their business long-term. So there's this big disparity, and I think that's going to have to settle in. Regardless, the main undercurrent that you see there is flexibility. Gig workers want flexibility, remote workers want flexibility. So I think payroll is going to have to accommodate that flexibility, and mostly where you're going to see that is dealing with a distributed workforce. So onboarding, managing your workforce, so being able to do things by your employees in a mobile app is going to have to be accommodated. And paying employees by paper check, that's just not going to be a thing of that's going to happen. In fact, if any of you are paying your workers by employees, I know this is not a sales-focused panel, but please come see me if you're paying your workers by check, or see Tyler. It shouldn't be happening. The third thing that I think is going to be a strong trend that we'll see, particularly in that time frame, is speed to pay. So along with that gig work trend that's happening, there's an expectation, it's table stakes when you're paying gig workers, that when they do their work, they immediately get paid for it. So there's that influence that's coming into payroll. And in addition to that, you have this strong growth that's happening in earned wage access. So this is apps that exist outside of payroll where workers can tap into what they've earned. So there's this influence that's going to set in where the expectation is really going to be that when you work, you get paid. So these are the things that I see happening over the next 5 to 10 years. Your payroll solution is going to have to accommodate new user experiences that are going to be easier and more intuitive. You're going to have to manage a distributed workforce, and you're going to have to pay people faster.
Makes a lot of sense. All those, you can definitely see that building, that kind of the groundswell for those type of things. So we'll go ahead and go to Mark here next. What are you guys doing at Restaurant 365 to stay on the cutting edge of ERP? I mean, we're seeing a lot of changes in accounting, a lot of AI, different technology, whatever it be, blockchain, a lot of things that people talk about that are taking place today. So what are you guys doing to stay kind of on the cutting edge, and what are you seeing there in ERP as far as technology?
Yeah, so, this works now, okay. So, cutting edge and ERP aren't two things you hear all the time together, right? It's not something super sexy. We use ERPs, just to get our processes and efficiencies done in kind of this one platform. I think Tyler touched on this idea of bundling, and at Restaurant 365, that is what we do, and we bundle all of that back office together to find kind of a harmony of your entire process, from soup to nuts, from accounting to operations, to your scheduling, and more to come as we continue to grow. What I'm hearing out there from the CFOs, and that's what I believe is keeping us on the cutting edge, is just making sure that we are tackling these problems ahead of them, right? I talk to the CFO probably once a week, as the head of product, I like to be out there and listen to their problems. But on this notion of bundling and kind of soup to nuts, one area of focus for sure is AP automation, right? Digitizing that stack of paper that you have on your desk. I think everybody in finance can really appreciate trying to do that. Taking those invoices, taking them through the process, leveraging technology, AI, machine learning, anything you can think of to get that data without a human touching it, right? Getting it in there, getting it cataloged, storing it, and then ultimately paying those invoices out, those vendors. We are leveraging fintech to help you manage those payments, get those vendors paid without licking an envelope, without sending. Nobody wants to do that anymore, and we're enabling that. On top of that, we also see a lot of data coming from this digital transformation. The digital transformation that's occurring, you're ending up with a lot of systems. Hopefully, as things consolidate, you'll have less, but think of it as this, I don't want to say data lake, but lake, ocean, or whatever of data that you're creating. Finding ways to get to that data, asking that data the right questions, that's going to become important. And then as you're doing that, that's just a tool, right? That's just the data. You're also going to need to have the talent to do that. Taking the talent that you used to use for entering invoices and stuffing envelopes and moving that, kind of upscaling them to be able to ask those right questions, look at the data, and really visualize what's happening in your organization.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Makes a lot of sense there.
Thank you.
Let's go over to Dave here. Question for you. What challenges do you see for Plena data as you work to make bots, more mainstream, as you're trying to increase that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, just before, if I can take a minute before I answer that question, I've never had access to so many accountants in a room. So I had 3 riddles that my wife and I talk about. Figured if somebody here can answer one of them. So the first one is, why did Sherlock Holmes get audited? The answer is he had too many deductions. We'll see the second one. Let's try the second one. What's the difference between an introverted and extroverted accountant? The answer is introverted, they'll look at their own shoes while talking. Extroverted will look at my shoes while talking. Okay, and we'll do the last one quick. Sorry, I know this is supposed to be educational, but it's too entertaining for me. The last one is what's an accountant with an opinion? There's a lot of you here. You got it, an auditor. Okay, we got 1 out of 3. Awesome. Sorry, back to business. So at Plena, we have this philosophy that humanity as a whole is going to advance towards automation. And those of you who follow Elon Musk, he's coming out with his robot. We're coming out with software robots, and the underlying principle behind this philosophy is we don't want humans to spend any of their time, which is very limited, doing non-creative, innovation-related work. And that's because, we are better off utilizing the gray cells in our head, doing more productive work than we are currently doing, right? And so at Plena, we're trying to, etch away at a small, tiny bit of it, starting with accounting. We noticed the trend of bots was accelerating in the last 5 years. UiPath was valued at $45 billion. They're our biggest competitor. So, we're a humble little startup. We just did a 10 million Series A last year. And our biggest challenge when we got into accounting was there was a general resistance to moving out of how things are currently looked at, right? So it's a frame of mind where people are they go to BYU, they study accounting, they're taught a certain thing, they go join an audit firm or a tax firm, they're taught certain things there, and it's a very rigid framework of thinking, right? So they're not trained perhaps like professional engineers or sorry. So they have a very defined way of doing things, and so I had to come out of my shell, literally interacting with accountants and trying to understand their frame of reference, right? And for good reason, because there is not a lot of room for error or creative thinking when it comes to numbers. So we had to go and say, how do we take a technology that is free form, that is allowing people to automate pretty much anything in a screen, those are software robots, and how do we make it work for accountants? So we had to strip out a lot of possibility of subjective judgment. We had to take the notion of AI down to just a rule-based process to say, hey, we can't have an AI make classifications on whether or not a certain transaction is a meal, or if it's an entertainment, or if it's something else. So we had to strip out the AI from our lingo, because for some reason that was scary, and I think it was for the right reasons. And we also had to make everything rule-based. But even despite that, we got to a point where we are pretty much able to automate 65 to 75% of an accounting department, and that includes reading things from an invoice PDF, classifying it to a right GL code, entering it into your ERP system. And the way these bots work is they literally interact with the screen just like a human being. They read what's on the screen, they make decisions, they enter information back on the screen. We're able to do a lot of AR, accounts receivable reconciliation, bank reconciliation. In fact, I think we have one of our customers on the panel every year. They do payroll, excellent payroll company. We were their customers as well. And yeah, our challenge in accounting was not so much technical. It was entering a field where, as engineers, we didn't quite understand the rigidity of the rules, and making their life easier required us to kind of humble ourselves and go down to what they do on a day-to-day basis and figure out exactly how they feel comfortable about using bots. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And you hit on something there, the rule-based, right? Accounting, you have to have a deep understanding of that to be able to do that. So it makes a lot of sense. So just one question. We'll start with you on this one, Dave. Just go through everybody here, and then we'll open it up to see if people have questions. Can you talk a little bit, is there a certain product innovation you're seeing? something in your space that has you really excited, either your company or just in general you're seeing in the industry from an innovative standpoint?
Yeah, so we have, at least in our company, we have been able to literally mimic every action in a browser, right? So we're able to create a Chrome browser mimicking framework. So what that has allowed us to do is interact with any application that you use in a browser, just like a human being, right? So we've trained the bots to write Slack messages, send out emails, go to LinkedIn and make connections and target people. Actually, our biggest source of sales for our own company is our bots running on our LinkedIn account and reaching out to potential prospects. So that's a game changer innovation where if a bot is virtually indistinguishable from a human being on a browser, it opens up endless possibilities of what can be done. Now we're only focused on certain outcomes that are monetary and that can help our company accelerate growth in the near future. But the possibilities are endless. And our hope at Plena is to eventually take this technology, which is not just us. There's a team at Google working on it. There's a team at Microsoft and several of the tech companies have devoted lots of money and talent to this. Is to make it open source in a few years so that other companies can take advantage of it just like we are.
Thank you.
So I talked a lot about bundling together to one financial operations dashboard, but if you think of the implication of that, it's you would now have one place to see all of your inflows and outflows, all of your spending on vendors, all of your AP spend, all of your card spend. And then over time, every company, Divvy, Bill.com would be able to provide, would be able to take the data of that spending month over month over month and learn and predict what you might spend in the future. So I think some of the big innovation we're seeing is like, hey, what if we could tell you what each department will likely need in terms of a budget 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarters from now based on what we're seeing you and your peers do throughout the industry. And so Divvy could become a tool for predictive budgeting to allow you to forecast more accurately, understand your cash position in the future. This type of innovation is only possible if you do have enough data and then can predict, obviously. But we're pretty excited about providing that, and that's one of the main things.
Yes. As far as innovation that I'm most excited about is the developments that we're seeing in the payments space. So when I started Every roughly 4.5 years ago, it was built off of the backbone of same-day ACH, which was relatively new. The third phase of same-day ACH launched in March of 2018, and I incorporated Every in April of 2018, and immediately began sourcing the right banking partner that could facilitate same-day ACH for us. And I spoke with over 30 different banks, and at that point, they were still trying to figure out how to operationalize same-day ACH, and the pricing was really high. At that point, it was $1 to $5 per transaction, and you can't really build, a payroll software and experience expecting that employees are going to get paid daily or on demand at that high of a price. And over the years, we've seen that price come down, and now it's in the range of where next day or regular ACH is. And so when you think about the payment space and moving money through the ACH network, you really have two options. You have moving money through the Fed or moving money through the clearinghouse. And the clearinghouse released an ability to move money instantly called real-time payments, or RTP, and some of you may have heard of that. And we haven't really seen much adoption of RTP up to this point. However, the Fed is going to release their version of Instant Pay here fairly soon called FedNow. And I think that's going to really accelerate the adoption of that Instant Pay experience, which is exciting for me. I always found it odd as a controller, VP of Finance, CFO, of hitting the button on approve for payroll and then having to wait 2, 3, 4, 5 days for that payment to ultimately arrive at the destination of the employee's account. I always found that odd, so it's exciting to me to see that innovation in the payment space and having the ability to move money fast to the employee, especially when they need it.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks. Mark?
So at Restaurant 365, there's a couple of innovations we're working on right now that I'm really excited about. So one I touched on lightly already, which was something to do with data. The second one is something around what Ron touched on, which is getting employees paid faster. So we're looking at payroll, adding that to our ERP. We're just launching an early adopter right now, and the focus is on the employee. As you know, restaurants go through a lot of employees and have a lot of employees, and they have a very they look at life very differently with the way they look at social media and the way everything's very instant, right? Everything's very instant gratification on things. They want to like things right away, and so they expect a lot from a payroll system as well. So that experience is really important. Like Ron touched on, not having to sit through a 1-hour training to figure out how you're going to get paid, how to look at your paycheck stubs, all of that. So we're bringing that to the mobile as well in a very, very easy to use, intuitive way, and then allowing that employee to have options on how they want to get paid. So we're working through that right now. I see that as something that's going to be really pushing CFOs to really innovate in this area and differentiate their organizations from others in the industry, especially in the restaurant industry. Going back to data, one thing we're doing there is also we're seeing a lot of that. I have a million systems that I need to report against, right? And luckily at Restaurant 365, we already take a lot of your systems into one platform. So we can easily be that one single pane of glass for you to see that. But we're continuing to add more, and we're continuing to add different ways for you to look at that data and ask questions about that data. For example, in the restaurant industry, huge push lately has been your customer success metrics, your customer support metrics, your CSAT, right? How are you, are you making a customer smile? Are they not smiling? How are they doing? How quickly are they going through the drive-through? Things like that. I know that's not extremely relatable to all industries, but we all have our little bits and pieces that we like to measure performance on. But yeah, being able to see that and then marry that with the accounting data, marrying that with any other operational metrics you may have, we're seeing a lot of move in that direction and having that capability to do that.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Appreciate that. So we'll give a minute here to ask. Did anyone in the audience have a specific question they'd like to ask? Take that as a no. All right, we'll keep going here, and next question we'll ask is to Dave. Do you expect bots to get to the point where small businesses can afford them, or do you see it really something that's going to mainly maintain in the enterprise and space?
Yeah, so that's the challenge we started out with. Was we said, hey, look, the enterprise players like UiPath are awesome, but they're not really servicing the majority of the customer base that can be serviced. So our mission was, how do we take this grand vision that humanity is going to be, fully robotic in the future, and narrow it down to a focus of SMB. The challenges we face is our incremental cost of innovation is not being covered by our customer base, meaning we have to constantly find ways to source funding for the innovation and then give a discounted price for that product to our customers. Because on average, our bots cost anywhere from 5 to 10 on the implementation or setup side of things. And then there's an ongoing license about 500 to 1,000 a month. And that's just covering our operational costs. It's not covering our engineering expense when it comes to, hey, Chrome just had an update, or QuickBooks Online just changed their interface, or we've got AP invoices that are super crappy, handwritten, scribbled on, and then we've got to figure out how do how do we eke out just enough input from the bot to read the edge of an invoice that's not scanned properly. So those things are our biggest challenge. Now, we do have a very supportive investor group, and the Utah tech community has been well funded. So our goal as a company is to not run out of money until we're able to service all these SMB markets. So yeah, that's the juggling act of my job every day, is how do I eke out the most out of innovation, squeeze the most juice out of R&D, while at the same time keep the operations of the business running.
That makes a lot of sense, being able to fund that innovation so you can better support the small to medium-sized market.
Right. And in the early days, it was just me coding, 24/7, and I was like, hey, I don't have to pay myself. But now people expect to be paid for some reason, so I've got to, find ways to get my friends that I hired from different schools to be like, hey, come work for me. We'll promise you a salary every month. We got to make this work. Next month starts over again. So that's where we're at. That's not so much a technical challenge. It's more of a, business challenge, if you will.
Sure. You mean people want to be paid? You think there's inflation or something going on?
Yeah, I offered to say, hey, let's do a stipend or bonus this year in gas, 1 gallon of gas for 10 lines of code. It was going more advantageous than cash bonuses.
All right. Okay, so next question, we'll just kind of go through the panel here. What advice would you offer for CFOs if they're looking, at bot or payroll or what ERP? What advice would you offer for them, as they're looking at technology and thinking maybe of making changes to their tech stack or how they can better embrace technology to improve efficiency? So maybe here we'll go ahead and just start with Mark here, and we'll work our way down. If each of you could just speak to that question a little bit.
Yeah, I think from my general ERP perspective, I would say find a product that plays well with others, right? I think that's probably, at this point, it's kind of table stakes, but I highly recommend you find somebody that can take the data, because you're going to grow and you're going to want to add other systems, and you're probably not going to want to swap out, especially an ERP system. You're probably not going to swap it out. It's very painful to swap out an accounting product. So you want something that can grow with you, that can add on other functionality, features, answer different problems, and grow with you. And I think that is through integrations, through an open API, and then just a good ecosystem of other partners that they can already help you with out the gate, of best practices and other technologies that you can leverage with that.
As far as advice goes, being a former CFO and being in your seat, just share a little bit of my philosophy of how I approached being a CFO, which may be helpful. The more expected work that a CFO does, so think of closing the books fast, going through a clean audit, updating the financial model, kicking out your reporting and your KPIs, introducing controls into your environment to mitigate risk, avoid fraud, all those things. Those are expected. So as a CFO, I was maybe a little more intimidated with the talent that we have locally in the CFO space. So I was always looking for an edge and what I could do that was over and above the expected work. And for me, that was trying to drive cost savings into the business or other ways that I could add value. I think payroll has a unique opportunity to be one of those extra add value types of tools that you can implement. And many of you may have heard of the 3 R's of HR. So you have recruit, reward, and retain. And I always would swap out reward with engage. It seemed to me to be a better word to use for what you wanted to drive into your organization. I realize it doesn't line up with the 3 R's and the acronym there. It's a little bit sexier, but when you think about recruiting and knowing that there's going to be this more distributed workforce, the tool that you use as far as payroll goes can help recruit talent that's outside of your local your local networks and your local environment. So you can add in workers that live in different states and different localities that will really drive value to your business. And we've seen that in our business. We're roughly a 60-person company, and 20% of our people are living outside of Utah. So we have employees in Washington, California, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and these employees have added a ton of value. So that's one thing that payroll can facilitate for you. Another is on the Engage side. So if you have a tool that's easier to use, it's going to save you and your employees time. Employees shouldn't have to bother you to go get their pay stub, their pay history, their tax forms, updating their direct deposit or their information. They should be able to do that easily from their mobile app. And again, this should free up time for them and time for you, where you can focus on more pressing work. And then the final thing on retention, if you implement a tool that's going to do something that's touching the employee on a personal level, think of paying them faster, that's something that's significantly more meaningful than the snack wall or giving them snacks or putting a food table in your office. These are meaningful things that touch employees on a human level that ultimately drive that loyalty and that retention. So again, think of payroll as a tool that you can use and implement that will drive something that's over and above your expected work as a CFO.
Makes sense.
So I think my advice would be, as you are selecting vendors, a lot of them are going to be software vendors, and trying to evaluate how good someone is at building software from the outside is pretty difficult. And you have a sales rep often involved that's making sure whatever they show you looks as good as possible. And I think my advice would be, as a vendor or a prospect looking at a software, is to judge the company by the rate of change and the improvement in their software. And how do you do that without using the software? I would say make sure you demand out of your account executive or the sales rep you're talking to kind of a list of improvements over the last 3 months. And if that list of improvements is long and impressive, you're dealing with an engineering team that can actually improve the product at a very high rate. And even better is if that company posts those improvements publicly available on their website. So you can just scroll through the change log of announcements, and your impression of this software company should be, holy cow, this thing gets better every single week, actually. And if you don't feel that, it's highly likely the software company you're considering is not top tier. And there are just so many top tier companies out there that you should not settle for anything less than someone who's rapidly improving their software. That would be my piece of advice.
I would echo everyone's sentiments here. I'm not in a position necessarily to give advice to CFOs, because I wasn't a CFO myself. But what I can provide is a lens of somebody from a leadership team, like a chief executive role. We often, the expectation, I hang out with a lot of founders, and again, these are tech companies, so it may not be a complete representation. The often expectation is, the CFO will be a solution provider to some financial or operational problem that the company is facing. But in reality, most of these founders, myself included, we find that our CFOs are just heads of accounting departments, which is a necessary but not a complete job description. What we're also seeking, above and beyond the necessity of closing the books, is to say, don't just come and tell us what cannot be done. Maybe try proposing, here's another way of doing something that's more cost effective, or here's where we can raise extra capital. I'm not saying this is how CFOs do it, but this is the expectation we have from the outside in the leadership team, to say, okay, what is the CFO contributing to the leadership team? We often see CFOs just being either, overlooked or just expected to not participate because that value add is not perceived, right? And typically comes from a COO role or a CTO role. But yeah, that would be, I shouldn't say advice, but it would be my 2 cents on if a CFO is looking for an edge, maybe think about creative ways to add value to the business outside of just accounting and closing the books.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and it's definitely about adding more than just that accounting and closing the books. And Tyler, I really appreciate your comment about putting that roadmap up, right? Showing that you're innovating constantly. I remember this company I was looking at the other day, it was a software tool for financial planning, and they put their roadmap out there, and you could see it. And I thought that was really nice to be able to understand, okay, here's what's coming, and realizing that they're delivering, they're not just standing, stagnant, right? So that's a great one. So just a moment here, I'll ask, before I ask more questions here, does anyone in the audience, anyone have any questions for any of our panelists that they'd like to ask? Give another opportunity here.
Yeah, good question. So for context, Divvy was acquired by Bill.com almost about a year ago, so last year, for $2.5 billion. And so the founder of Divvy, Blake Murray, just kind of sailed off into the sunset just recently, so he's doing okay. And you have kind of this, I would call it, shock to your system as a smaller startup getting acquired by a bigger company. And I was actually talking about this beforehand, there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and I'm guessing you guys would not be surprised by any of them. The pros being this, Bill.com is an incredible company, one of the highest valued multiples in all of tech, and there's reason for that. They've got an incredible business with great leadership and an opportunity in front of us. And the cons are it's a different culture. You're integrating cultures that are two pretty distinct cultures. And a large organization often has more barriers to velocity in product development, I would say. But I think great product leaders figure out how to fight through that and maintain their pace of innovation and velocity. And Bill.com has certainly been an incredible partner to Divvy, and now we're glad to be teamed up with them.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That's a great thought and point. I've actually been very pleased with the adoption of fast pay. So when I first started Every, that was the one variable that I couldn't put a pin on. I didn't know how long it was going to take for that to proliferate. Analyzed, from front to back to front, all the other variables, but that was the one piece that I just didn't know. But over the past 4 years, we've really seen that accelerate, and it's great to see. I think there's going to be some real challenges to making that more mainstream, and that's because knowing behind the scenes with payroll companies and their software, the competitors in the space, it's going to be really hard for them to accommodate that. And just one takeaway. There's still some kinks to be worked out operationally on the earned wage access side of the space too. And I'll just leave y'all with a couple thoughts on that. There's actually a proposal right now with the IRS for 2023 focused on earned wage access apps. And the proposal is that the withholding deposits accelerate to weekly. And it's not just for the payouts for earned wage access. It's for all amounts that are made available to your employees. So there's still some kinks to be worked through on that. So if you've implemented an earned wage access app for your business, be very attentive to that, because it's going to accelerate your cash flow, again, accelerating your weekly your deposit requirement timing to weekly. And it's also going to add in some operational complexities too, because what you make available oftentimes is in the earned wage access space, not ultimately what's going to get paid out. Oftentimes it's a percentage of. So again, there's going to be some kinks that are going to need to be worked out with. I would say long term, it's best to partner with somebody who's thought through those and really solved the core problem there, which is full payroll, full amount, paying out that without any fee. Those are the things that I think are going to really win out long term and make that something that's more good for the worker, and operationally something that's going to last. That's how I would respond to that.
Thank you. Appreciate that answer. We're heading up toward the end of our time here, but just real quick, I was going to mention one thing. I've talked about different industries. Myself, I've studied a lot financial planning tools over the last year, and I've met with probably 50 different companies and just released a market guide about planning tools. And what we're seeing there, just to speak a little bit about that as financial planning tools, is we're finally starting to see the technology catch up where they're affordable for small businesses and medium, where if companies want to get off Excel, there's always some flexibility you give up, but there's options out there. We're seeing rapid growth in that space, a lot of data integration, open APIs, a lot of dashboarding, trying to bring it all together in that planning tool so that you don't deal with the pain points as you scale of Excel or Google Sheets or other things like that. So just want to talk about that a little bit, and I think we had another question there.
You're talking about implementing something you've purchased, a software you've purchased? Or even looking at future technology. Yeah, so this, my quick answer, and feel free to disagree, if you have to hire a team to help you implement it, it's likely, it's at least the way the trends are going now, it's likely too complex and too difficult and poorly built software. Now, that's maybe a wrong answer because I'm not accounting for large enterprises need help implementing software, but for the standards SMB, if you need help implementing the software, it's likely a bad engineering organization.
Yeah, I would second that for sure. And as I stated earlier, software is moving more towards where you can literally just pick it up and start using it. And if you need to go through a 1-hour training, then you either pick the wrong software or the company running, building that product didn't build it with the future in mind and the employees. I mean, we deal with this every day with the restaurant industry. The challenges, the bar has been risen so high on, I want to be able to just swipe up to do whatever I want to do, right? Swipe up, swipe left, swipe right. I want to close my books by swiping right? That's what everybody wants to do now. I don't know if you can, but we're not there yet. But we're working on it. But yeah, the expectation's been set so high, and I agree with Tyler. If you have to hire a team, especially a team, then you definitely need to look elsewhere.
See if there's just one more question. We're just about out of time. So are there any other questions? All right. If there's no more questions, we'll see anyone from the panel wants to add, any closing thoughts or anything you have that you'd like to add that you didn't say. Here's an opportunity. All right. Well, if not, we'll thank our panelists and thank you guys for joining. Appreciate you making time, and thanks again for all of you for being here and answering questions.